I'm Jacob Schilling. This is Stephen Martin. We're here at the UCCS Library on the 10th of February 2015, and I'm going to collect an oral history for the Digital Veterans Story Project. Good morning, Stephen.
Yeah, good morning, Jacob. I guess it would all start, you would say, for a veteran's purpose of when I would have enlisted in the military, and maybe some purpose and reasons behind it, kind of like the way that shaped out for a military career. But I grew up in Dallas, and my grandfather was in the military, served World War II, fought in the Battle of the Bulge, has a pretty neat history behind his military career that, until I served in the military, I never really knew anything about it, or I never thought it was something of much significance. But I was in high school, graduating with minimal GPA. Decided that a semester at community college that I was attempting just wasn't really that much fun, and looked at as much an out as a better opportunity to do something with a little more responsibility than what I was currently involving myself in, and went to school and had a recruiter. I was smoking cigarettes at the time. Went to school, had a recruiter come and approach me for a light. Spoke for about 20-ish or so minutes about everything but the military. School, growing up, little NASCAR, just little things here and there that he was being a part of. And in my parting way with him to just go off to my class, he just said, "Hey, what would you ever think about maybe wanting to join the military? Do you think it'd be something you'd like to do?" Hadn't really even thought about it up until then, and gave me his card. I gave him my information. He sent me a phone call the next day, and 3 weeks later I was signed up and I was on my way to MEPS. So a pretty quick transition. Wasn't really sure even now how that thought process happened, but it just kind of did. Enlisted with him and joined in basic for my first stint as a military police officer. So I was 31 Bravo now. They've changed all their stuff over the years, but 31 Bravo for the MOS. Experience was spent an abnormal amount of time at basic training because I got sick, and I got sent home for a month of convalescent leave, and wound up doing AIT for military police training, which is 10 weeks twice, and was there for about 19 weeks for a full basic training stint over what it should have been or it should have just been 19 with that extra 10, but I spent another 10 over the top. So I was a very trained and well-trained private, coming out with having done everything twice and well both times. Stationed first time at Fort Hood in Texas. So from Dallas, being about 3 hours away from home, was a good place to kind of ease myself in comfort-wise for what I was kind of preparing myself for what the military was going to be like. Wound up in a really, really good unit with a lot of guys that were pretty like-minded, going through a little almost 8-year career. You meet a lot of people you have a lot in common with, and you meet a lot of guys you don't. And it's just kind of, I think, the walk of life with such a large organization with people all over, from the U.S. and different places in their lives when they find the military the same way. But experience-wise, we were kind of set up in a really good spot. Had really good leadership and guys ahead of me that kind of paved the way and made it a lot easier than I could have imagined. 3 years at Fort Hood led into our first deployment for our unit. So this would be October 2006. We deployed and did. Initially, we were ramped up to do entry team and infrastructure, surveying as a hidden raid team, where we were going to work with an ICE infrastructure group where they would go check on these generators in this school district and do a few things, and then we'd have orders to kind of bust in this door, but the presence wasn't supposed to be raid or mob mentality of like, we're coming in and taking over your town. So that was like all of our, FTX and training up into the moment we get to Kuwait, land, get your orders, everybody's going to work in a prison. So we all went to like specialties SWAT school, like SRT entry team and sniper courses, and we were off doing these intense 72-hour field operations where we were just busting down door after door for 3 days, and then it's like, so we're gonna not do any of that, which was kind of I think everybody knew it as a military police, or as the way that after a few years that we've been in Iraq, that a lot of the shift in focus was changing, with a lot of with Copper, the main prison in Iraq, being really heavily overrun with just a lot of people, that smaller detainee operations were opening and being manned to have just as much purpose of bringing people in as kind of doing an initial interrogation and weeding people out, because it was hard to keep thousands and thousands of people on hand. But spent over a year in Baghdad, FOB Prosperity on the Green Zone. So this is just kind of right at one of the main entryways on the main route that goes between Bayat, the airport, and that comes all the way across into the Green Zone where the embassy and everything was. Deployment-wise, had a really good experience. Didn't have near the engagements or you'd say traumatizing experiences as most people had, and it can be very thankful for that. But definitely had growing experiences and close calls that put a little stress and strain on kind of the reasons that we were there, and putting our lives on the line in some situations could be pretty scary. Had a real interesting experience in Iraq, coming back full circle to walking around my community college campus as a student in Texas, and meeting this recruiter for the first time. When I came to my first unit at Fort Hood, I had been out of contact with him and couldn't get a hold of him. I tried calling his number, his cell phone that I had. You graduate, you want to call your recruiter and say, "Hey, I'm not a mess up, made it," and couldn't get a hold of him. The number I had was his recruiting number. He was a traveling recruiter out of San Antonio. That they would travel all over Texas and kind of do spot recruits rather than work straight out of one office. Couldn't get a hold of him at his office. Show up about a week later. First formation, run up in the battalion formation because I have no idea what I'm doing. Next person to my right is my recruiter. And you could say, but you're in Texas. It's Fort Hood. It's a big base. There's all these, of course, there's going to be opportunities for anybody of recruiting. Or he was a field artillery guy to be in the same place you would be. But it still was quite a coincidence. And then we spent those next 3 years at Fort Hood still in the same battalion, different MOSs. We were in a branch, one of the battalion support BSTBs, where you basically have medics, everybody all thrown together, and none of it ever works because there's too much going on. And but we spent all that time together, and we spent countless times that I was driving a truck in Iraq, and he was sitting in the gun. And fast forward or rewind 3 years ago, he was just asking me for a cigarette. And so how quickly things have changed.
And now he's asking you for ammo.
Yeah, now he's asking me for ammo, which thankfully I have that on hand, and it was just a really cool realization. We were down at FOB Falcon about an hour 45, depending on your convoy speed, from the Green Zone, which is just another really large base, kind of south of in Baghdad, but more on the south side. And we had been down there. We had popped up a tent, and we're doing some like quick interrogations with a team that was a Stryker brigade that was bringing in just detainees left and right. They were doing 24-hour ops in this neighborhood nearby, and we just needed a facility to, again, filter out kind of who was meant to be there, who just kind of got picked up in the chaos. And while we were on the base, headed to lunch one day, I saw our trucks from Sergeant Plavny, this is my recruiter, from his team just screaming down through the base, far across. We kind of knew some of the the configurations of the outside of the trucks and the way that all of our turrets looked, and just kind of knew that it was somebody from us, and the speed they were going was a little bit quicker than what you should be driving on, the normal installation or the fobs over there. And sure enough, they had just got hit with an IED under an overpass just right outside of, right near that base. And when you think of an IED and the concussion power that it has, and then you imagine that it's in a kind of semi-overpass tunnel, and that kind of reverb and the way that can enclose some of that impact. He had been in the gun, and just some of the pure pressure from that had completely busted him, and he was in a pretty concussive state. And I just remember them, running over, getting him loaded up. The Black Hawk had already landed, and they were rushing him off to one of the hospital, I think over in the Green Zone. And again, you take cigarette to loading ammo to being one of the four legs carrying a stretcher onto a Black Hawk. It was pretty cool. Just that it served kind of this you're meant to be here purpose over find yourself in the middle of a war zone and go, why am I here? What's really going on? And so I've followed a pattern of that throughout my Army career, that there's been just ones and twos of things and coincidences and grateful happenings that have kind of shaped a lot of that for me. Spent that whole year again with my recruiter. He recovered well. I kind of just catch up with him here and there. It's been a while since I've gotten out that I've chatted with him, but after I had left, we'd be intermittent through just keeping in touch. Another great friend of mine who has fallen suit with this, we've stayed together basically all the way through, was my first team leader when I got to Fort Hood. So this would be Sergeant Tim Mayhew. Tim and his wife and his daughter lived in Fort Hood and had been there for a really long time, and had deployed the previous year with the unit before the new flush of privates of us all had gotten there. And so I was assigned to him for a while, and then you get tossed around your platoon, and you don't really ever stay with the same person. But we were always close. He was a great, inspirational leader just for the start. Throughout Iraq, he got a position assigned to him now as a new Sergeant First Class, to be on a protection detail in Europe at NATO, working for a 3-star. And so this was a 18-ish man military police filled protection team, all with protective service detail or team training. And he got this position, came back from deployment. We all made it back. Had a year or so that he was getting ready to ramp up and then go take this job. Through his whole interview and application process for that, they asked who around in his unit they could steal one more person. And sure enough, I had kept a really good relationship with this guy, and he had meant, I think, a lot to me just as much as I had meant to him. And it was kind of hands down, he picked me. They got my paperwork, and it all fit, and it would be an opportunity to make it work. So I started the process of getting all the approvals and such to get this opportunity to go be in a suited, very relaxed environment position that wasn't about to deploy and kind of get to live in Europe and do a lot of different things that the military would offer. So I see it as a great opportunity for an individual. The Army saw it as you're one person that when you leave, that's one person we have to fill, and then that's not the division way or all these organizational structures for retainment that did not mix. Wound up with a very difficult path ahead of me of walking in and out of doors being told no, that I wasn't going to get this paperwork approved. As kind of a stab in the side, my buddy and I, as the brigade was ramping up to deploy for the next deployment coming up, and the way that the fencing processes work when you're on a military installation, and you have the ability to re-enlist for like another position on the same base, or to re-enlist to stay, not to go, and that your windows are open, but they have this fencing or blanket that they can apply that it then needs extra approval to get you actually out of the base. So that person that was supposed to give me that approval was a full bird colonel that was in charge of 2nd Brigade, and when I went to get that approval, I was met with, no, I'm not really going to sign that, but actually I just want you to be my protective service officer for our next deployment. So as an E5, I would run the security detail for a full bird and to be in charge of master sergeant and below and captain and lieutenant below on like protection doctrine. That all these individuals were field artillery or infantry or something of the same. Still a really cool position, and over being just a normal, doing detainee operations or something like that, the way the military would work. I would have jumped all over it had I not had this a little bit better of an option that I was wanting to lean towards. So I turned him down. I said, no, sir, I'm not going to take your position. This is the job that I want, and I would much, appreciate you to sign it. And he said no, and we left on mutual terms of not giving in to one another. So quickly, I started this kind of feverish way to get what I wanted, which was I walked into the next person's office, and then he yelled at me, and I walked out, and I walked into the next person, and then he yelled at me, and I walked out. And I kind of did this until I made enough networking and connections that somebody was going to do something about it. Because I saw it as a chance for an individual, and myself particularly, to have professional development in the military that's outside of what just is ingrained in what everybody expects, and everybody else didn't see it that way. So I had a lot of convincing to do. But another guy that is then backed up again to a connection that I made 2 years ago prior to deployment, somebody that I would see a major all the time on base, on deployment and off. One day asked me how things were doing. Hey, sir, this is my problem I'm having. Sure enough, he had just been newly assigned to the 3 Corps, which was General Lynch, who commanded Fort Hood, 4-star general, to his office, and had a little bit of pull with stuff that kind of happened in his realm. And with him and some conversations with HRC in dealing with kind of the paperwork process and getting things denied over the department that's outside of Hood on getting all these orders, cut and whatnot for me to go. And take in mind, this is still like already a 6-month period that this is going on, because I'm still in the unit and I'm having to do daily operations. I don't have every day to just kind of be getting told no, which is what it really felt like.
You actually have to work for a living.
Do a little bit here and there, but I'd get an afternoon off here, and I was in somebody's office trying to figure something out. And somehow through those connections, somebody at HRC called up, and I don't know General Lynch's first name, but if it was Tim, they would have said, "Hey Tim, this is going on your base," and it put, a place where you have the biggest military installation in the U.S. Completely scaled down to, the person in charge of all of that, put all of his efforts into one person. And I thought it was really cool. He called his master sergeant out from his office and told him everything and said, "I'd like this to be handled." This master sergeant then called my battalion from the office of General Lynch with that tagline, to where now I really thought I had done it. I pushed enough buttons, and I was in trouble now. And when I met this guy, I was terrified, and my first sergeant and everybody was kind of there with me, like, I got to listen to what's about to happen. And sure enough, and these were all people that were still supportive of me, but had no pull against a lot of the upper chain. Sure enough, this guy said, "Hey, your whole story has kind of been explained to me. Let's walk and talk. We got some offices we need to go to." And in about a week, I had orders and was on my way to Europe.
All right.
Which was pretty incredible to have been, fought for as the little man. So, you doing good on time?
Yeah, I mean, we can go as long as you want.
Yeah. So, had this opportunity now to then again follow my first team leader to Europe and be a part of this, civilian clothes protection team. We worked for 3 stars at NATO for the United States military representative, who was a 3-star position, but often, as a joint chief environment. You have Navy, Air Force, Marine, Army, Coast Guard. Everybody's kind of there at some point, one another, in the U.S. realm, and then you have all the 26 developing nations of military and international military outside of the U.S., which was incredible. So working in this, highly secure facility, wearing a suit every day, carrying, a vest under my suit, having my suits tailored so I could fit the vest and not look funky, carrying pistols, driving around fast European cars and up-armored Mercedes and little, gutted out and souped up Italian Alfa Romeo sports cars, and never driving under 200 on the highway. Just kind of the secret agent lifestyle you would imagine, even to the point of all of our cards that we used for business cards. Here I am at just E5 in the Army, but now I'm handing business cards around to officers and all these other people as a special agent Martin. Was awesome. A unique opportunity, and professionally, I think shaped the next bit of my years going into coming to school, and what that has kind of developed for me on career path and what's available and how I can handle certain situations because of this. A little bit more, you're in the military, you're told what to do a lot. And you have 2 types of leaders, one that walks you through every single position and tells you, you do this, you do this, you do this, you do this. Or the one that tells you this is what needs to be done, and you're doing it on your own. And your way about it maybe is not the way that they would have intended, but the end result can be just as good or as better. And that is, I think, highly often overlooked when working with a professional development way and trying to mentor and build a mind of an individual. So what that really offered for me was kind of the lavish life of living in Europe for 4 years, traveling to all these different countries. We often did support missions for Petraeus, so I drove Petraeus a few times. I did stuff with Robert Gates and Admiral Mullen when they were the Joint Chief of Staff, the Chairman, and Secretary of Defense. And so they would often come over with their CID criminal investigation teams to Europe, and we would do support missions with them, and it was just a lot of fun. A lot of fun. Again, a great position. And then kind of the military has to come in and ruin it somehow.
Of course.
And what was left for me was the drawback of 2012 changed the reenlistment options. It left you as an individual that had a year on your reenlistment, like when your window would close, over the normal like 6-month period or 9-month period. I can't remember the exact terms now. Where you could go almost up until your final day out of when you would ETS and reenlist. That drawback change was in 2012, you had a year out. So you had that option of, you separate in September 2012. You've got September 2011 to pick. You have already reenlisted, picked your new dates, picked your new job, because September, October, you're already forced out upon the next year with no opportunity to reenlist. That change was made in a window where I had about 2 weeks to make up my mind, because then the 1 year hit. Not like, okay, yeah, you're kind of close on that. You get to have your 1 year like 6 years from now, or sorry, 6 months from now. I just kind of got pushed right up in that, okay, January 1st, everything from then on, the entirety of January, that's now your year. Even though it wasn't a full year, they kind of had to like make this adjustment. So my goal at that point was, I was looking at doing green to gold. I really wanted to find a university that would offer a lot of like veteran and student services, while I could do the green to gold active duty option, remain still in the military, where you get to retain your E5 or E6 pay while getting your GI Bill and all the other like compensation. So it would have been sweet. The catch of that being, there's like very few that qualify for that or get picked, and I was just banking on that the 3 and 4 star involvement that I had would be recommendations that I would have gotten that chance. But the number one requirement for that option is retention ability. And when you now have a year out and 3 weeks to make up your decision, and you can't submit your packet until April, you don't, that option is no longer available, even for just the normal green to gold. And the likelihood of me doing the option of what they told me, which was, yeah, just reenlist green or needs of the Army, which everybody's heard that. Reenlist needs of the Army, take whatever option they get you, and then submit your packet, and I'm sure your next unit will approve.
Kind of how they approve your position in Europe,
Yeah.
right?
So I've been down that road once. Not that I doubted any of my confidence in dealing with the situation or how I could have handled it. It just wasn't worth it. When the other option is get out of the military, my timeline put me getting out weeks before a fall semester would begin at a university. Taking the credits of what the GI Bill offers as a really good support to be transitioning out of school at an older age, where there's not as much my family's paying for my school, kind of past that, where you've lived on your own and supported yourself for 8 years, and you can always go back in. Right. As long as you meet the age requirements and don't wait too long. But the OCS and those officer-style candidacy programs are still available. But I think I highly overlooked or underestimated the experience I would have coming out of the military and getting back into a civilian and university and college realm, on that there are just as many options now available to me. Even more so, I think, because of the development I've had through the military, that I don't need to or am as dependent on going back. I think wait 8 years, don't go to school, not in the military or just in any facet of life, have been in education now at a later time. I think the experiences I gained in the military definitely put my focus of going to school up into my 30s at a much greater level of responsibility than I ever would have been if I had followed through straight from out of high school.
You feel like you've been more successful
yeah,
than you would have
definitely
been.
more successful. I mean, I think that case by case, the military can offer you all of those can basically just lay out all of these characteristics, and you can have all of the what is the word I'm looking for? Just basically all the skills to be more successful in a like higher education than I would have been, or that some people would have been. But I think at the same time, the military offers a lot of things that people don't even take advantage of, or that even the path that I had, and as paved out and nice as it seems to be, not as traumatic or as struggling as a lot of people's experiences have been. That I was fortunate to have individuals and peoples around me that didn't let me just kind of go through the grain of, yeah, this is the Army, deploy, come back, deploy, come back. There were those people in charge that were looking out for our opportunities and our the best for each of us, as much as we were like asking for it of them.
Do you think it did require a lot of self-advocacy to rise above the normal tide of Army life?
I think that for me it was as much as not having the inclination of wanting to be in the military ever before. Now this is my lifestyle. It wasn't a learned behavior all the way up until, okay, now this is just what I know and expect, to where I often saw my time in the military as just as much like an escape to get back to kind of the familiar life from before, or just being a civilian, which is nice in its ways.
Well, it's easier.
Yeah.
Let's give it that.
Yeah. I mean, I never, prior to being in the military, I'd ever only shot a BB gun once at probably just a tree, and then going to just being highly weapons qualified and doing sniper courses in Iraq to long range sniper courses with the SRT entry and SWAT teams, to having team leaders that were very weapon heavy, and so we were often on our own shooting, just not even when the military required it. And there's those aspects that I think were great, but they were not as much as a part of my past life. And I haven't shot a gun but once since I've been out of the military in almost 3 years. So I think I can walk in it and out of it just as quickly as I can walk out of it just as quickly as I walked into it. But I was able to really hone in on the particulars of my experience with it and how much it's helped me to get to where I am today. So
that makes sense. Now, is there anything in particular that you would like our listeners to really hear, something that meant a lot to you, perhaps an experience or a perspective?
I guess kind of honing it in on this, the focus here of really what the university offers an individual like myself or yourself that's come out of the military, in familiarity and having a comfortable location that is doing things proactively to outreach into a community that can often get just kind of left behind. We've all, if you're a veteran or not, you've heard of the forgotten veterans for over countless periods of times, and the way that our veteran hospitals are just kind of maybe in disrepair, working to get there. There's lots of issues and opinions on governmental reasons why that would probably happen, but the school itself has really developed a way that has made, for me, the transition just basically seamless. Coming from Europe, choosing Colorado to go to school was particularly that Colorado and I think Washington are the only two states that accept an out-of-state GI Bill path veteran as an in-state tuition directly. Not being a home of record from Colorado, there's quite a process to apply for in-state tuition, be able to come, even though I'm from Texas, have that approved through the VA so that I get that 100% right off the bat. My GI Bill is covering me as well as giving me the full potential for the credits that I need. I did all that while I was still in Brussels. And so I flew, back to Brussels. I had about a week and a half, and I started my first semester back in, first semester at college. I did tuition assistance and transfer credits and stuff while I was in the military, so I transferred over basically an associate's degree. But even all that added to it, transferring credits, applying for all those programs, coming here for the first time, and basically having a feel like I already know the campus because I've been told very systematically, these are the offices you go to, this is the process. And just as much as it being, not that I was a special case with where I was coming from and all the different stuff that I had, but I think the volume of our individuals like this that have come to the university have really allowed a set-in-stone process to be developed for how the Veterans Office deals with new students, returning students, dealing with doing organizational stuff around the school, and being just really supportive. So, yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for your time in the interview, Stephen.
Yeah.
Signing off, this is Jacob Schilling with Stephen Martin. We've been at the UCCS Library for the Digital Veterans Story Project on the 10th of February, 2015.